On April 19, 1997, Tony's Pizza got a last-minute delivery request for 2 cheese pizzas to be delivered to 196 Scott Road in Franklin, New Jersey. For the delivery driver, it was one last chance at a tip, so 22-year-old Jeremy Giordano waited for the pizzas to cook and then headed out to his car to make the 6-minute trip to the address. It turned out that the owner of the pizza joint, 25-year-old Giorgio Galera, had gotten a weird feeling about the call, so he jumped in the passenger seat to keep Jeremy company and give him a little backup in case anything shady went down. It was a short trip, just around the corner, and when they arrived, there were 2 young men standing on the road near the delivery address. Jeremy pulled up next to the customers, and Giorgio let them know that they owed him $16.50. That's when one of the men reached into his pocket, but instead of pulling out cash, he pulled out a .45 caliber semi-automatic pistol and started firing into the vehicle. The other man started firing a .22 caliber revolver into the vehicle as well. Before they even knew what was happening, Jeremy and Giorgio were riddled with bullets. Jeremy was hit twice, with one .45 caliber bullet piercing his right ear, exiting his neck and shattering the driver's side window. The second .45 caliber bullet hit him in the neck and severed his spinal cord, killing him instantly. As bullets from the .22 hit the dash, Giorgio was also hit with bullets from the .45. He was hit in the elbow, and as he leaned forward, one of the .22 caliber bullets grazed his nose. Another .45 hit him in the cheek right before a .22 caliber bullet hit him in the back of the head, killing him. When the weapons were empty, Jeremy and Giorgio were dead, but Jeremy had also been hit twice in the right knee, which made him release the brake pedal. The car rolled forward before stopping in the mud. The attackers opened the car doors, threw the pizzas to the ground, and then pulled each of the victims out of the car. They searched Jeremy and Giorgio's bodies for cash and then tried to steal the car, but it was stuck in the mud. The attackers fled the scene, but it would only take the authorities a couple of days to arrest the 2 young men who would become known as the Pizza Murderers. This is Monsters. Thomas Koskovich was born on May 6, 1978. His childhood reflected deep dysfunction and emotional trauma. A complete psychological assessment showed that he suffered abuse and neglect during his early years. His family's history included domestic violence, substance abuse, gambling addiction, criminal behavior, and multiple suicide attempts. The most devastating impact came from Thomas's father, who told him he loved him the least of his 3 sons. Dr. Edward Doherty, a forensic psychologist, diagnosed Thomas as mentally ill with a tenuous grasp on reality and identified him as a developing paranoid schizophrenic. Jayson Vreeland was born on September 5, 1979. It's believed that he had developed a psychological dependency on Thomas. Dr. Paula Bortnichak's testimony revealed that Jayson saw Thomas as a charismatic and powerful leader. That perception created a submissive relationship between them. They had only met a few weeks before they started planning a murder together. They had both attended Sussex County Technical School for a while, and though they would see each other there, they didn't become friends until after Jayson got kicked out. The killers displayed a disturbing detachment from human life. Police statements revealed Thomas's chilling desire to, quote, kill someone just for the thrill of killing someone. Their sinister plans went beyond mere words. Both teenagers deliberately chose pizza delivery workers as targets because they thought those workers would be an easy target. In the small town of Franklin, there was a sporting goods store called Adventure Sports. Thomas had gone into the store and looked around, so he knew exactly where the guns he wanted were located. Then, on April 8, 1997, a friend dropped him off in front of the store after it had closed, where he broke in and stole 3 firearms. the .22 caliber and .45 caliber weapons used in the murders, as well as a .40 caliber semi-automatic pistol. He used a baseball bat to break a front window, went right to the guns he wanted, and then left while the police were still en route after being alerted by the alarm company. He walked to a nearby apartment complex where his friend was waiting as a getaway driver. As payment for being the getaway driver, the friend received the .40 caliber pistol. After the store was robbed, people in the community said they saw a boarded-up window, but there was no news about the robbery or what had been stolen. The store's management didn't seem concerned that there was someone running around with 3 stolen firearms, but they definitely should have been. It seemed that the guns were stolen as part of their plan to kill. They had previously talked about killing someone just for the thrill of it. Those guns were stolen with the express intent of using them for robbery and murder. After obtaining the weapons, Thomas and Jayson found an abandoned house to use for their plan. The abandoned house at 196 Scott Road had been built in 1918, and the last person to live there had passed away years before. In the days before the attack, the killers took their stolen guns out to a field and practiced firing them. They wanted to get a feel for the kick since neither of them had fired a gun before. On the evening of April 19th, they left Thomas's house at about 9 p.m., and Thomas had ripped a few pages out of a phone book. They were the pages that listed local pizza places. At about that same time, Jeremy Giordano was at his parents' house. He was bringing them a pizza in the last hour of his shift at Tony's Pizza. Thomas and Jayson drove past the abandoned house to make sure everything was set for their plan, and then they went to a local Dunkin' Donuts to use a payphone. There, they made calls to 4 different pizza restaurants and asked if they would deliver to Scott Road. The first pizza joint said no, so Jayson hung up and called Tony's Pizza. Jayson knew Jeremy and didn't want him to be the victim, so he asked if Jeremy was delivering that shift, and when the employee on the phone said yes, Jayson hung up. The teens paused their quest and got some food at the Dunkin' Donuts and also asked to borrow a phone book to try to find more pizza places. Back then, to order a pizza, you had to call the restaurant, tell them what you wanted, and they would look up your information based on your phone number. People didn't really have cell phones, so the landline phone at the house would usually come up with an address. Thomas and Jayson didn't have a number for the house on Scott Road because, well, they didn't live there. It was abandoned and vacant. They tried to convince a few other pizza places that they had just moved in and didn't have a phone yet, but the other 3 places they called wouldn't deliver without a phone number. After continuous rejections, the teens called Tony's back and put in an order for 2 cheese pizzas. Scott Road was only accessible by turning off North Church Road to the south. Scott Road did connect to Rutherford Avenue to the north, but just before you got to Rutherford, there was a small bridge over the Wallkill River, but the bridge was blocked off. Thomas drove his 1984 Chevy Cavalier onto Scott Road from Rutherford Avenue and then backed the car up to the guardrails across the bridge. The two walked from the bridge about 1,500 feet or 580 meters to the abandoned house to wait for their pizzas. The problem with Thomas and Jayson's plan was, well, most of it. Thomas's car had one headlight out and was missing a muffler, so it was extremely noticeable. Multiple people in the area saw the car driving on Scott Road, and some even saw it park at the bridge. It was true that the parking spot would give them a pretty clean getaway, as authorities would likely be coming down Scott Road from the south end, but it wouldn't be hard to find people who had remembered them being in the area. After committing 2 murders, Thomas and Jayson drove to a local Presbyterian church and asked God for forgiveness. Then they drove to Thomas's house where they changed their clothes and hid the evidence. They talked about their alibi and agreed to tell people that they had been at the bowling alley that night. A couple of buddies had decided to drive down to the bridge over the Wallkill to see if it would be good for fishing, and not long after turning off North Church Road, they saw a vehicle off to the side of Scott Road. When they got out to see if anyone needed help, they saw the bodies on the ground and raced to a phone to call the police. After making the 911 call, they drove back to the scene to wait for first responders. When an officer arrived, he noted that Jeremy's green Pontiac Grand Am was still running and the headlights were on. When EMTs arrived, they checked for signs of life, but both men were dead. Investigators documented and collected substantial physical evidence at the crime scene. They found 6 .45 caliber shell casings on the road, one in the passenger seat, large amounts of blood both inside and outside of the vehicle, multiple bullet fragments from different calibers, and blood spatter patterns throughout the scene. The second problem with the murderer's grand plan was that Thomas had not been quiet about his desire to kill someone. Not even that, he had told a friend named Christine Slater that he wanted to kill a pizza delivery driver. So when she heard about the murder of 2 pizza delivery drivers on the news the following morning, she immediately called the police and told them to look at Thomas Koskovich. A resident near Scott Road also called the police to report seeing Thomas's car in the area around the time of the murders. When the call from the pizza order was traced to a payphone at the Dunkin' Donuts, witnesses there identified Thomas and Jayson as being the people who had been on the phone at that time. Surveillance footage from the establishment supported that information and showed Thomas and Jayson using a phone book at 10 p.m. on the night of the murders. The New Jersey State Police got a search warrant for Thomas's house and arrived there at 2:30 a.m. on April 21st. Police found damning evidence during their early morning search of the home. The search turned up both firearms, Giorgio's wallet, and blood-stained clothes in a gym bag. The DNA analysis revealed matches between blood samples from various items and both victims. A forensic analyst confirmed that Thomas's coat had blood matching both Giorgio and Jeremy, while recovered gloves had blood that matched Giorgio. Thomas later gave a 46-minute recorded confession that detailed his role in the murders. Jayson's statement turned out to be more complex. He had made several incriminating comments to another inmate during his time in juvenile detention. He admitted that he and Thomas, quote, wanted to see what it was like to kill somebody. But he continued to say that he had only shot at the dashboard to prove his friendship to Thomas. He claimed he didn't want to kill anybody, but the investigation would prove that he had. He was the only one who fired the .22 caliber revolver, and it was a bullet fired from that weapon that ended the life of Giorgio Galera. Neither killer expected to get caught, according to detectives. The investigation showed that overconfidence led them to skip basic precautions like wearing gloves at phone booths or trying to escape after the murders. Jayson told investigators that they had planned to continue their crime spree with more robberies and car thefts. Thomas and Jayson were tried separately because Thomas was 18 at the time of the murders, but Jayson was only 17. Committing a murder during the commission of another felony, in this case armed robbery, made the defendant eligible for the death penalty. In the state of New Jersey, though, anyone under the age of 18 at the time of the crime could not be sentenced to death, so Jayson was held in a juvenile detention facility until his trial. Thomas's trial was pretty open and shut. There was more than enough evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he had committed the crime, and on April 23, 1999, Thomas Koskovich was found guilty and sentenced to death. Jayson tried to argue that he was not trying to kill anyone and was only following along with Thomas, but the jury didn't buy it. He was found guilty on February 25, 2000, and sentenced to life in prison. Of course, there were appeals. The New Jersey Supreme Court overturned Thomas's death sentence in 2001, and he was given a life sentence as well. Both defendants tried to get post-conviction relief in 2007. They claimed they didn't receive effective help from their lawyers. Jayson's appeal challenged witness testimony and said the court should have changed the trial venue. The New Jersey Superior Court rejected both of their appeals and kept the original convictions intact. Jayson's earliest parole date is 2044 and Thomas's is 2072. The 1997 pizza delivery murders remain one of New Jersey's most disturbing criminal cases. The murders prove how violent thoughts can suddenly take hold of someone and that any random person can become their victim. Sure, Thomas and Jayson robbed their victims, but that didn't seem to be the main catalyst of their plan. The robbery was secondary to their desire to experience taking a life. It takes a real monster to be so curious about what it feels like to kill that you actually do it. If you're a fan of true crime, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss an episode. You can also hit like or leave us a comment. You can check out our other show, Somewhere Sinister, on YouTube or anywhere that you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to support the show, check out our merchandise at thisismonsters.com. The link is in the description. Thanks again, and be safe.